The moniker Magnus Carlsen has become a symbol of chess greatness since 2013, when he first became world champion. He is widely regarded as one of the greatest chess players of all time due to his outstanding skill, extensive knowledge of the game's rules, and insatiable desire to better himself. Carlsen's career has many high points, yet even the most successful competitors have to deal with setbacks. In this video, we are going to look into one of the most fascinating aspects of Carlsen's chess career: his fastest defeats. The match with Judith Polgar. Let's start with the game against Judith Polgar, the best female chess master of all time. The game began with pawn e4 from Judith and pawn c5 from Magnus. Judith played f3, where Magnus's pawn met her knight at c6. Judith advanced her pawn to position d4. At that point, Magnus arrived in c6 with his knight. As a result of Judith's move, Magnus shifted his queen to c7 from e3. In retaliation, Judith shifted her queen to position d2. After a couple more exchanges, the outcome was pretty even between the two players. In the meantime, Judith castled while Magnus moved his bishop to b7. This gave her king a feeling of safety. They both advanced their pawns and then traded some pieces with one another. Magnus moved his bishop to b7, where it was directly in front of the pawn on e4. A threat to Magnus's knight was created when Judith moved her pawn to position e5. Magnus had no choice but to trade his knight for the g4 pawn. To force the knight off the playing field, Judith moved her rook to position g1. With a couple of more steps, Judith posed a danger to Magnus's bishop. Here's where Magnus messed up big and lost the game. Aware of the ticking clock, Magnus placed his rook to position c8 while Judith positioned her bishop at b6. Magnus was cornered and forced to make the ultimate sacrifice of losing his own queen. Soon after making that fatal mistake, he quit the match against the great female chess master. In just 19 moves, he was defeated. The match with Alexander Morozov. The next game is facing Alexander Morozov, who has previously held the position of the second-best chess participant in the globe. When Magnus moved his white pawn to c4, Morozov answered with his pawn at e6. White knight advanced to square f3, while the black pawn moved to square d5. After a sequence of exchanges involving a set of knights and pawns, Magnus was in a commanding position to initiate a charge. He did so by advancing his f4 pawn to f5, followed by a shift by the black knight to c5. When Morozov changed his queen to e7, Magnus sent his knight to g4. The black bishop retreated to c8, and the white knight switched to f6. A large exchange ensued. While the white bishop proceeded to position e7, the black bishop shifted to f5. Morozov kept up his offensive stance, with his bishop now stationed at e6. After Morozovic's knight went to d5 and the opposing black bishop got hold of e7, the e4 pawn moved forward to e5, and Magnus moved his queen across the playing field to h5. After an exchange of bishops, the white piece ended up in position g5, while the black bishop retreated to position d5. Magnus was hopeless, yet the pieces kept moving around. The game progressed until Morozov attempted checkmate by guarding his king. Magnus bowed out at this time and shook hands, obviously dissatisfied with the bout's outcome. The match with an anonymous opponent. The final game of Magnus is played against an anonymous opponent. He battled Magnus in Oslo, Norway, even though he was not a renowned chess player. Magnus had the white pieces to begin the game and placed his pawn in position e4. The opponent subsequently chose to respond with a similar move using pawn e5. Knights advanced one square, the white to f3, and the black to c6. The white bishop dropped to position b5, while the black knight moved to e7. While the opposite player advanced their pawn to a6, Magnus shifted his to c3. Magnus resumed the advancing pawns by moving to square d4. Magnus' play went up and down until his pawn was eventually on h3, and the opponent's bishop slid to h5. The white pawn made its way to g4, allowing Magnus to trade a bishop for two pawns. The f5 pawn has been traded to the f6 square. The black queen was now in position e5, while Magnus's bishop had fallen to f4. As a result, the other opponent could move his queen to h5 and begin an attack. White's queen has moved to position g3 after the opponent's pawn was captured on g7, while the black rook has advanced to position e8. It was at f6 that the black knight made his way. Magnus suddenly made a terrible move by moving his knight to f5. This permitted his opponent to advance a pawn at no cost and launch an assault on Magnus's queen. Magnus attempted to make a comeback with queen g4, but this was the fatal blow. His queen made a terrible mistake and Magnus resigned in shock. He just went to a regular player in front of a huge audience and lost. That's all for this video. Leave your thoughts on this moment. Also, take a minute out and subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned. See you soon.